The stars had learned to bow. Across 7 spiral arms and more than 1,000 conquered systems, fleets adjusted their orbits the moment her sigil appeared on scanners. War priests lowered their plasma lances. Merchant princes silenced their disputes. Entire civilizations held their breath, waiting to learn whether the Empress would pass them by or erase them. She was called Orith Vera, sovereign of the celestial dominion, the one history would remember as she who ruled the stars. From the obsidian throne suspended above the artificial sun of the capital world, Orith watched the galaxy as others watched weather. Her species, the Volari, had once been mortal and fragile. That weakness had been burned out of them through conquest and genetic ascension. Orith herself was the culmination of 1,000 years of selective perfection, taller than most species, her skin a living constellation of bioluminescent veins, eyes like polished void glass reflecting probabilities before they happened. Emotion was a tool she rarely used. Mercy was a myth she had outlawed. Status, she said, her voice calm enough to freeze oceans. The grand strategist bowed low, frilled crest trembling. The outer rim pacification proceeds as predicted, Radiant Empress. Resistance collapses in the Helier drift. However, he hesitated, a dangerous thing in her presence. There is an anomaly. Orith's fingers tightened on the arm of her throne by a fraction of a millimeter. Define. A pre-warp species, designation human. Sol system. They have no fleets capable of interstellar war, yet 3 of our observation outposts have gone dark after contact. Silence rippled through the chamber. A minor species causing Dominion losses was statistically offensive. Explain, Orith said. Our analysts believe it is not their technology, the strategist replied, but their behavior. They boarded Outpost Kelt with no hesitation. No fear response. When challenged, they advanced. Orith leaned forward slightly. Primitive aggression. Yes, Empress, but targeted. They ignored Volari personnel until fired upon. Then they disabled the station with surgical precision. Curious. But curiosity did not change policy. Prepare the Edict of Compliance, Orith said. Their world will kneel or burn. Earth burned red beneath alien skies. Commander Elias Kane watched Dominion dropships punch through the atmosphere like falling gods, their hulls glowing violet as they screamed toward the surface. Cities were already evacuating. Satellites lay dead. Communications were fractured into screaming fragments of panic and resolve. Elias stood at the edge of a ruined landing zone, armor scorched, blood drying along his jaw. He was human, unmodified, unascended, fragile by every galactic metric. Yet he stood. Behind him, a dozen soldiers prepared their final stand. They knew the truth. There would be no victory today. Only time bought in blood. Sir, a young lieutenant said quietly, Dominion forces incoming. Heavy units. Elias nodded. Then we do what we were trained to do. The lieutenant hesitated. They say their Empress is watching this invasion personally. Elias almost smiled. Good. He rolled a shoulder, pain flaring where shrapnel had torn through earlier. Beneath the torn fabric of his uniform, something dark and deliberate was visible on his skin. A symbol burned there long ago, lines scarred deep enough that even regeneration drugs couldn't erase them. A circle, broken by a vertical line, intersected by 3 angled strokes. The mark. Elias didn't believe in destiny, but he believed in warnings. The sky split open. Dominion warforms descended, towering, elegant, terrible. Energy weapons cut the air into screaming ribbons. Earth's defenses answered weakly, bravely, and were erased. Elias stepped forward. Orith Vera observed the invasion from orbit, her consciousness threaded through 1,000 battle feeds. She felt no thrill, only inevitability, until she saw him. The human commander did not flee, did not plead, did not even attempt diplomacy. He advanced, weapon lowered, eyes fixed on the descending warforms. Strange. Magnify, Orith ordered. The image sharpened. The human's face was scarred, his posture tired, but his gaze held something she had not seen in centuries. Defiance without despair. Then a blast struck near him, tearing his armor, throwing him to the ground. Orith expected the feed to cut. Instead, the human pushed himself upright again. And as he rose, the camera caught his exposed shoulder. The symbol. Orith's breath caught. Her throne chimed softly as ancient protocols awakened. The bioluminescence along her skin flared, uncontrolled. No, she whispered. The symbol burned in her vision, not as an image, but as a memory. Long before the Dominion. Before the Volari were emperors. When they were hunted, fractured, near extinction. When an ancient war had consumed half the galaxy. She remembered a species lost to time. Warriors who bled red and stood against impossible odds. Who carved that symbol into their flesh as an oath. The first defiance. They were erased, Orith said aloud, voice unsteady. They were gone. The grand strategist looked up sharply. Empress. Cease fire, Orith said. The command rippled through the fleet. Too late to stop several more volleys, but enough. Weapons powered down mid-charge. War forms froze in place. The strategist stared. Radiant Empress, the human resistance. Is irrelevant, Orith snapped. Bring that human to me, alive. Elias didn't understand why the killing stopped. One moment, the air was fire. The next, silence. Dominion war forms stood motionless around him, weapons dormant. Above, the sky darkened as a massive flagship descended, blotting out the sun. A beam of light engulfed him. He braced for death. Instead, the world vanished. The throne chamber was impossibly vast, a cathedral built from star metal and gravity-defying architecture. Elias stood alone on a platform of light, weapons gone, wounds sealed by unseen fields. Before him sat the Empress. Orith Vera regarded the human with eyes older than his species' recorded history. He felt the weight of her attention like pressure on his bones. You bear the mark, she said. Elias swallowed. So you noticed. What is your name? Orith asked. Commander Elias Kane. United Earth Defense. Who gave you that symbol? Her voice sharpened. Answer carefully. Elias met her gaze. No one gave it to me. We found it. Buried. On Mars. Orith's eyes widened a fraction. Impossible. An underground structure. Elias continued. Older than humanity. Records. Warnings. A legacy left behind by a species who called themselves the first defiance. The chamber trembled as Orith rose from her throne. They were our enemies, she said softly. They taught us fear. And we learned from them, Elias replied. They left us their history, their mistakes, and one message. Orith stepped closer, towering over him. Speak it. Elias took a breath. When the throne forgets why it was built, remind it. Silence. Orith's mind raced through forbidden archives. The first defiance had nearly destroyed the Proto-Dominion, not through numbers or technology, but through refusal. They had stood when surrender was logical. They had fought when extinction was certain. And in doing so, they had forced the Volari to evolve and conquer, to never be vulnerable again. You are not them, Orith said. No, Elias agreed. We're weaker, slower, louder. We mess up constantly. He gestured at the symbol on his flesh. But we remember. Orith looked at the mark again. At the scar tissue. At the choice it represented. You stood against my fleets, knowing you would lose, she said. Yes. Why? Elias didn't hesitate. Because someone had to stand first. For the first time in centuries, Orith Vera felt something fracture inside her. The Dominion did not fall that day. But it changed. Orith withdrew her fleets from Earth. Not in defeat, but in reflection. Across the stars, whispers spread of the Empress who halted an invasion because of a symbol burned into human skin. Elias returned to Earth alive, branded now not just by a scar, but by history. Years passed. The Dominion opened diplomatic channels. Slowly, carefully, humanity was watched, tested, challenged. They failed often. They argued among themselves. They showed compassion where logic suggested cruelty. Orith observed it all, and she remembered who the Volari had once been. When the Dominion Senate objected to reforms, Orith silenced them with a single decree: strength without purpose is decay. When warlords resisted, she stripped them of command. When border worlds rebelled, she offered something unprecedented: choice. Centuries later, historians would debate the exact moment the galaxy shifted. Some would point to treaties, others to battles avoided. But Orith knew the truth. It happened the moment she saw the mark on a human's flesh. The reminder, the warning, the promise. She still ruled the stars, but now she remembered why the throne existed in the first place. And somewhere on Earth, Commander Elias Kane taught new recruits a lesson carved into scar tissue and memory alike. Standing doesn't mean winning. Sometimes it means making sure the universe remembers it can choose to be better. The galaxy did not change overnight. Empires never do. For years after the withdrawal from Earth, the Celestial Dominion continued to exist much as it always had. Vast, disciplined, terrifying. Borders still bristled with war fleets. The Empress still ruled from her obsidian throne. To the outer systems, nothing seemed different. But inside the Dominion's core, something fundamental had cracked. Orith Vera could feel it in the silence. The throne chamber had always spoken to her, not with words, but with resonance. The artificial star beneath the floor hummed in perfect harmony with her neural implants, feeding her projections of probability, conquest vectors, and future wars. For centuries, those projections had pointed in only one direction: expansion. Now, the projections fractured. Every time Orith closed her eyes, she saw the mark, not as it had appeared on the human's flesh, but as it had once been worn by warriors who had stood against annihilation, knowing they would not live to see victory. The first defiance had not sought to rule the galaxy. They had sought to stop it from being ruled by fear. And somewhere along the Dominion's ascent, Orith realized, the Volari had forgotten that distinction. Summon the inner conclave, she ordered. The command rippled through the capital like a shockwave. They came reluctantly. The conclave consisted of 12 ancient strategists, bio-augmented admirals, priest-scientists whose lifespans spanned multiple human civilizations. They bowed when Orith entered, but their expressions were tight. They sensed change. You halted a compliant invasion, said High Executor Krull, his voice carefully neutral. You recalled fleets already in position. Yes, Orith replied. You invited a pre-warp species to negotiations, another added. Unheard of. Yes. Murmurs spread. Krull stepped forward. Radiant Empress, has Earth compromised you? Ortha's eyes snapped to him. The chamber temperature dropped several degrees. You presume weakness, she said. That is your first error. She raised one hand, and the chamber filled with holographic light. Ancient star maps unfolded. older than the Dominion itself. Symbols appeared. Ruins. Battle sites long scrubbed from official history. These, Orith said, are records you were never meant to see. The conclave stared. Before the Dominion, she continued, we were prey. The first defiance stood between us and extinction. They did not conquer. They endured. Crawl stiffened. They were an obstacle. They nearly destroyed us. Yes, Orith said quietly, because they forced us to confront what we were becoming. She dismissed the projection and looked at them one by one. The humans carry their legacy, not their power, their choice. Silence pressed down. You will adapt, Orith said, or you will be replaced. The conclave bowed lower than protocol required. On Earth, Commander Elias Kane did not become a hero in the way stories liked. There were no parades, no monuments in his honor. Humanity had survived, yes, but the scars of the invasion ran deep. Cities had been lost, millions displaced. Reconstruction was slow and bitterly argued. Elias resigned his commission 2 years later. He disappeared from headlines. Instead, he taught. In a quiet training facility carved into the deserts of New Mexico, young recruits gathered around him, not just soldiers, but diplomats, engineers, philosophers. He showed them recordings recovered from the Martian ruins, translations of the first Defiance's final messages. What matters, Elias told them, tapping the scar on his shoulder, isn't how strong you are when you stand. A recruit raised her hand. Then what does matter, sir? Elias smiled faintly. Why you stand when no one else will. Humanity entered the galactic stage cautiously. No grand declarations. No threats. They traded. They observed. They argued endlessly among themselves about whether trusting the Dominion was insanity. Sometimes it was, but sometimes it worked. The first true test came 17 years later. A frontier system rebelled against Dominion rule. As always, the conclave demanded annihilation. As always, probability engines predicted success. Orith watched the projections. Then she issued a different order. Deploy humanitarian corridors, she said. Offer withdrawal. No fleet bombardment without my direct authorization. The admiral stared. This will embolden rebellion, one warned. Perhaps, Orith replied. Or, perhaps it will teach restraint. The rebellion ended without planetary destruction for the first time in Dominion history. The galaxy noticed. Whispers became conversations. Conversations became movements. Not all welcomed it. A coalition of warlords attempted a coup during Orith's 50th year of rule. They believed her softened. Distracted by humans and ancient ghosts. They were wrong. Orith crushed the coup in a single night, swift, precise, merciless. She did not rule less fiercely. She ruled with memory. Decades later, when Elias Kane lay dying in a quiet hospice overlooking rebuilt Martian valleys, the sky above Earth changed color. A Dominion envoy arrived, unannounced, unprecedented. Orith Vera herself descended. She stood at the foot of Elias's bed, her presence filling the room with impossible gravity. He laughed weakly when he saw her. Didn't think I'd get a house call from an empress. You altered the trajectory of an empire, Orith said. That warrants acknowledgement. Elias looked at her. Did it work? Orith paused. Yes, she said. Not perfectly, but enough. She reached out, hesitated, then placed 2 fingers lightly over the mark on his shoulder. The first Defiance believed legacy was carried through blood, she said. They were wrong. Elias smiled, eyes closing. Yeah, we figured that out. He died peacefully moments later. For the first time in recorded Dominion history, the stars dimmed their artificial suns in mourning. Centuries passed. The dominion endured, but it no longer erased civilizations to prove its strength. Humanity spread slowly, imperfectly, stubbornly. They failed. They argued. They stood up again. And in the halls of the celestial throne, carved into the obsidian beneath Oritha's seat, there appeared a new symbol. A circle, a broken line, 3 angled strokes. Not as a warning, but as a reminder. She still ruled the stars. But now, the stars ruled with her. And the galaxy, at last, remembered that even the smallest voice, if it refuses to kneel, can change the fate of empires.